for kicking it off, Kim. That's awesome. So Kathleen, why did you get involved with Project Paint?
Oh, well, Laura and I have history. So Kim mentioned the Craft Center at UCSD, and in 2012, the Craft Center was annihilated at UCSD, and Laura and I were part of a contingent of, Laura was a grad student there. She was doing her PhD in sociology, and she was our major student organizer. The rest of us were. So it was a group of instructors. I was an instructor and community members and students. And one day, it was kind of crazy. It was like we would have these meetings and would try to resurrect the Craft Center, and we'd have these meetings, and it just so happened one day on a Saturday after the meeting, I stuck around, and we just sort of, and she was working on her dissertation, and she said she wanted to do her dissertation on gender performance in a hyper-masculinized environment, and she wanted to do a program in prison, but there weren't any, and so she created one, and I said, I can paint. I actually can't paint very well, but I said I can paint, and I became the first volunteer, and so that's like 6 years ago.
It is kind of a miraculous story. I think about, so when we first went in, we didn't know, we just sort of thought we would do some classes, right? But then the warden had this very specific idea about these landscape murals, and we kind of were like, we don't do murals, okay, but it happened. They're beautiful. They're still up in the visiting rooms, and they actually serve as the backdrops for family photographs, which is really amazing. So it worked out perfectly. But yes, I am forever indebted. Now I'll probably start crying too. But I am forever indebted to Kathleen for being someone who jumped on board right away when it was sort of just an idea. And as a team, I think we have really done an amazing job. So thank you. Okay, so Robin, what are some of the courses that Project Paint offers, and what class do you currently teach?
So right now I'm teaching a class called Paper Goods, which is exactly what it sounds like. We started out making handmade paper. We've done origami, make your own currency. Right now they are working on decks of cards and board games. We also made a yearbook, which I'm really excited about, and we actually had a photographer through the California Arts Council come in and do headshots of each of the guys a few weeks ago. If you visit projectpaint.org, I'm going to plug that many times, but you can see the photos there.
Robin is also our communications director, so she helps with all of that.
So, but other classes, like I said, last year I taught printmaking. I'll be teaching that again when we start up classes in the fall. But Kathleen, her class is social practice. We've had, when I first started volunteering, you were doing kind of a survey project-based class. So that was, depending on the project, painting, sculpture. We always incorporate writing. What else do we have on there? We've done workshops on the weekend. So we did a comic strip workshop, which was really fun. It was a Saturday, Sunday. By the time we were done with that, each guy had produced a comic strip. We brought in bag lunches and kind of were on the yard all day. And we are always sort of developing new classes based on feedback from participants when they give us kind of their assessments at the end. And some of our, I think, most interesting projects have come from suggestions from students, so stay tuned to see what we're doing in the future, course-wise.
And Robin, can you tell us about how a Project Paint class operates?
Yeah, so a typical night, we have some security clearance, but it takes a while to actually get into class. The guys are called out from their buildings, and usually we start with kind of a check-in, like how was your week? Do we have any announcement? Do we have any news? We've started now in my class doing like a joke of the night. We come in and on our way there we look up like an appropriate dad joke and they love it. We do.
You have to look them up?
Well, all the jokes I know are like inappropriate for the
Completely inappropriate.
prison environment. And I'm already like,
Yes, I have to
leash.
constantly talk to Rob.
I like to push the limits of curriculum and comments. Then we assign reflections, which are written assignments for them to work on during the week that always kind of correspond with the project, right? So just as a working artist would have to do an artist statement per se, or wall text, or journaling, we kind of want them to always be in the habit of having to do some critical thinking or creative writing that relates to the visual art that they're doing. So we review that, we talk as a group. A lot of these guys are also not used to ever sharing work that they've done with other people. So that's part of it, is just learning how to share and give feedback and listen. Then we'll give sort of a lesson, especially if it's the beginning of a new project. We always try to bring in context of, historical examples of work, always bringing in like books for them and lesson plans. And then studio time, which is just a work period. We have one storage locker that shares the supplies for all of the classes we operate. Work period, and some of the time is spent checking out supplies. Like every single item has to get checked out and checked back in, down to, if it's an eraser, a little eraser, we still can't have that go missing. Or lost. It's more likely that actually would just get misplaced. But so that's sort of a typical night. We assign the homework for the week and we see them the next week.
Yeah, and when they come in the next week, we have a conversation and they share what they've written over the week, and it's really interesting. When they're on the yard, people divide racially, but when they come into class, that all those boundaries sort of drop. It's really fascinating that we can have at any given table people of different races, and while they're in class, those boundaries break down.
Yeah.
When they go back out into the yard, they'll separate, but while they're in our class, they really bond and share.
And we don't assign seating, but it just happens naturally because the environment we create is like...
The environment we create is...
it is much more like a classroom studio space. It's not a prison space during a couple hours. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
My super entertaining 300-page dissertation goes all over it. But yes,
If you want a copy of it.
I have a hard copy if anyone wants to borrow.
Yes,
It is pretty good.
I'm waiting for
I
Robin's
believe
notes.
she thanked me in it.
Of course I did. Oh, all right. So Kathleen, what are examples of some of the other projects that you've done in Project Hand?
Oh, we've done, in my 6 years there, we've done, the funniest thing was trying to teach surrealism. And you would think that they'd get that, but no, surrealism was probably the most difficult class I taught there. But as far as we've done, oh my God, yes, that was so. So sexism is a pretty difficult topic to address. But what I did was I had each artist, inside artist, research a female artist and make a quilt square that represented either her work or something about her, and then we put them all together, and yeah, it really broke down some barriers. That was probably,
That was a hard one, I think,
That
for
was-
some.
yeah.
Just trying to explain in that environment, like, the reason that you know who all these male European artists are is not because there aren't other artists. It's because that's the canon. And there's a lot of pushback on like, well, I don't want to do this. That's not fair. Like, why can't I do a man artist? And just trying to explain to someone in a way that is respectful and fair, but also is like, no.
I brought in a book that was 50 artists you need to know. 50 artists you need to know. I brought this book in. The only woman in it was Frida Kahlo. And that was the only reference they had. And it's like I forced them to acknowledge women artists and to represent women artists. And yeah, it was a beautiful thing, and we laid it out, and it was, yeah, and just quilting. Oh my God! The other thing, another project we did was tea towels, and I taught them how to embroider, and we embroidered, and what they had to do was come up with
It was like a saying, some kind of positive affirmation.
a positive affirmation. So we started with, what are the negative things you think about? And come on, you're in prison. They think about negative things all the time. So let's turn that negative thought into a positive affirmation, and let's make that affirmation be something that you're going to embroider on a tea towel. You could have heard a pin drop. Embroidering tea towels.
Well, and I think that a lot of the projects are really about pushing those sorts of boundaries. I mean, as I think about it, like we've done dolls, we did flag making. I mean, we've done a lot of, different types of projects.
I made them make dolls.
And a lot of it is really pushing back against this idea of what good art is. I mean, and I think that's probably the surrealism issue, right? Is, for a lot of them, you're a good artist if you can replicate something photorealistically, right? And so kind of pushing beyond that and saying, hey, art comes in so many different forms, and sometimes it's actually harder, to do a non-representational piece. That I think has really, been eye-opening for a lot of them, and they've really enjoyed sort of pushing outside of their comfort zones. So I know you've talked a little bit already, Kathleen, about how you developed this project, but how did the concept come to you? Just give us a little bit more background as to how this all came about.
I wanted them to connect and with outside artists. And here are a couple outside artists right here. And they were intimidated, and they thought they weren't worthy of contributing to this project. And it was just like, no, I mean, how do you make people connect with somebody they will never meet, they will never speak to, I don't know, I'm getting, talk to them.
So one of the things though that kept coming up in a lot of their comments was this desire to talk with people outside, and this is just one kind of quick anecdote, but I had been asking someone if they had done any kind of commissions for people, and he said no, and I was really surprised, and I was like, but I saw you working on a photo, from a photograph last week on a piece, and he was like, oh, well, that was for another inmate, and I'm like, but it's still a commission, right? And he was like, but no, I'm talking about like commissions for people on the outside. And so there really is something of that sense of being validated, feeling like people care, people want to work with you. I think that was like really amazing to a lot of them. And so, Kathleen kind of inviting people, I think it was sort of surprising to them. And then when they realized that was a possibility, they were just floored,
Yeah, I mean, Kim's
Yeah.
artist that she worked with, Juan, I mean, really his living is made by photorealism. He does portraits for other inmates and girlfriends. This is my girlfriend, and he is like, and that's a commodity, and that's really how they make a living, because they get paid what?
Like 15 cents an hour.
15 cents an hour for the jobs they do inside.
Yeah, the most is $1.07 an hour. So Ty and Kim, I wanted to ask both of you about why you decided to participate in this. We heard a little bit, about your entree into this, but what actually spurred you to join up?
I'll jump in first. Couple things kind of came together pretty quickly when Kathleen started talking to me about it. My daughter that I mentioned was in the car during this accident. She's up at UC Santa Cruz and is a pre-law student. So we've had a lot of discussions about judicial system, reforming judicial system, things that she's seen from visits that she's done to prisons and so on. So it wasn't a sort of a complete brand new thing that when Kathleen brought it up. It's actually something that I've been sort of getting some groundwork for my daughter and fascinated by. So that was kind of happening in the background when this popped up. At the same time, I do a lot of photography. I live in East Lake, which is sort of the last bit of housing before you get out to scrubland and mountains and things behind eastern Chula Vista. And a lot of times when I'm out there, especially in the late afternoon, early evenings doing photography, you can see the lights of Donovan. And so there's a lot of time when you're by yourself and there's just the wind and the lights of Donovan, there's a lot of time for reflection out there, wondering what's going on. What are these guys going through that are there? What got them in and who gets out and those kinds of things. The third thing I just want to bring up real quick is that I know somebody, and I'm not going to throw out any names or anything, but I know somebody that spent some time working at Donovan. And so I've had conversations about what it's like to be a guard, and what goes on with inmates. And so I sort of had a second person view inside the prison through some of these discussions. So at the point that Kathleen said, would you be interested, it was like, yes. And it just really, I didn't know where it was going to go. I spend more time with her with things that want to get off a hot blowpipe. I don't spend a lot of time drawing. I don't spend a lot of time painting or other things. So in that sense, I was definitely going up into the great unknown, but willing to try and see what happens. Usually when I throw all my preconceived notions about things and safety and stuff to the wind is when I grow the most as an artist. And so this was a big jump, but it was a great jump. So.
For me, I think I'd heard about something you were doing a project paint on Facebook, and I was like, oh, that sounds cool. So I was very open to it when you put out the call for artists. And in general, I'm blissfully unaware of the corrections industry most of the time. But without going into a long diatribe, I really don't like the way corrections is run in this country. It seems to be more about punishment and profit making than rehabilitation. So just the chance to sort of give something meaningful to an inside artist, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty simple for me.
Well, it's interesting to hear about the kind of preconceived notions, of what prisons are like. It's really interesting, Ty, that you have that sort of access to the correctional officer point of view, and then I definitely think the kind of more holistic, what does mass incarceration look like, as an angle to kind of use in the project. Sounds amazing. So maybe as a follow-up to that, Kathleen, what were some of the initial thoughts of the inside artists? You mentioned some of their hesitation and concerns of kind of worthiness, but I know we have some actual quotes from them.
I do. The guy's right. And this, Kim, is your artist. What were your initial thoughts when you learned about the project? My initial thoughts were, I'm excited. And I just could not wait to get started. Just knowing that I was going to work on a piece with an artist from the outside was inspiring. I was excited and nervous at the same time because I've never collaborated with anyone. Nervous for the thought of not being as good of an artist as my partner. That, do I deserve this? This is an awesome chance. I figured the idea existed, but I would not come to fruition. Wow, thank you for making this happen. I was super happy. At the same time, I didn't know what to expect, anxious to share my ideas with my outside partner. I thought it was cool to be able to collaborate with another artist that isn't incarcerated and completely unknown. I wasn't sure my artistic ability was up to the task of working with someone who more than likely had more experience and more talent. I was completely thrilled to put a collaborative project together with an outside artist. I was really excited about the project of collaborating with another artist because I had never done it before. I was excited about the project and thankful I was included in such a wonderful opportunity and to connect with the community. I mean, these guys just crave feedback, just crave any sort of interaction, and yeah.
So Kathleen, can you talk a little about how the actual collaboration happened?
So, it started, I don't know if I said this already or not, but if I did, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself. So, the outside artist, so I appealed to my friends and colleagues, and I begged and borrowed and thankful to everyone who contributed to this, but the outside artist gave a prompt, and it could have been a word, it could have been some were poems, some were statements, some were just very a simple word, and that was what I brought to the inside guys, and they started the project. They were each given a 12 by 16 piece of canvas paper, and they started their project, and then I would haul them out every week and haul them back in and back, and the back of my car was a mess. Well, back of my car is always a mess. Don't judge me, Rich. Don't judge me. But they would write to one another, and they would give feedback. And so here are these people that will never speak, that will never meet, and yet they're communicating not only by writing but also visually. And so that's how it went until just last week when we finally got them all out.
So, Ken and Ty, how did you develop that theme? Kathleen mentioned it could be a word, a poem, a phrase, anything like that. How did you come up with that initial prompt?
I started off with two artists, and the first one being out doing a lot of photography and kind of finding some interest in street photography. I also was in Europe for a couple weeks last year for a glass conference and become fascinated by Italian graffiti in some of the major cities over there. And it just sort of popped out, you know. This is where I can see Donovan from, is this place I go and shoot graffiti on a regular basis. And it just sort of, it was right there. It's I needed to find somebody who wanted to collaborate with me on graffiti, and so that one was a pretty easy one. The other one was kind of personal. Having, like I said, a little bit of background, talking to somebody who worked inside the prison and seeing the prison at night, the lights and everything, and sort of projecting, you know, what's it like to be there, what do the people go through, and so on. I almost came up with a question. My second topic was future focus. I just wanted to open a question, and with a bachelor's degree in human communications, we were always taught, ask a question and then shut up. Just let the silence draw somebody out. And I thought, future focus. Just give them those two words and see what they say. Because I really wanted to know, what do these guys have to look forward to? Do they have hope? Are they going to be there the rest of their lives? Do they have some chance of parole? Do they have a chance to maybe go to a better place within the correctional facility if there is something like that? So I was just exploring myself with that one, just opening the question up and putting it out there, and I couldn't wait to see what the answer was going to be. So that was what the second one was.
Cool. So I was thinking a lot about water and images of water, and eventually just sort of came up, I wanted to come up with something really open-ended to give my partner room to do whatever he wanted to. And so I came up with your mind is motion, and just hoping that it would literally make him sort of go deep inside and maybe bring something out that he hadn't before. So yeah, and I think what he did was really pretty amazing.
Yeah, I definitely think it pushed him. He
Yeah.
reflected quite a bit about that.
Yeah.
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 So as a follow-up to that, how did the collaboration develop and how did the communication work between you and your partner? Were you ever surprised by anything they said or did? Yeah.
I actually brought the letters that I got from both my artists, and I've read them through a couple times since we started. One decided to use the name Church. We didn't have to use our names. We could use initials or whatever. And I think the same thing with them. They were allowed to pick their known to art, if you will, how they wanted to be known to us. So Church was the first one that I read the letter from. And in his writing, he seemed very at peace. Not something I expected. I thought there would be, being in that pressure cooker environment of all these people sort of in a small city, literally, I thought there'd be a lot of tension and other kinds of things, but he actually wrote to me and said that he has felt more at peace in the last 4 years that he's been in Donovan than he ever felt when he was free. I thought that, that's pretty powerful. He told me that he found God. He actually gave me a date 4 years ago, August 20th, that he said he literally gave himself and his will over to Jesus. And when I sent Future Focus in, I was really curious as to what kind of thing he was going to send back as an initial drawing. And it was very simple. It was the frames of glasses. And I thought, well, good start. We're focusing on something. We're going to fill these in. We're going to have some peripheral vision. There's lots of things that visually we can do with this. And he drew a lion and a lamb with a pencil and a tree. And that was pretty much what he drew. And there was a lot of real estate on that canvas that was left. I think Hemingway once said something like, there's nothing more frightening than a white blank piece of paper, if I'm paraphrasing correctly. And to me, it's canvas, because I'd much rather have a hot piece of glass on a pipe and have Kathleen going, do this, do that. So the canvas to me was, no, I didn't say that. You're very instructive, Kathleen. Sensei. So I had my own sort of, things that I was dealing with, thinking I hope I'm as good as he is. I hope we can do something that collaborates that looks like a good collaboration. And it took several rounds. I was glad that we had the advantage of several rounds back and forth. I think that really made the projects what they are, because it became a conversation. And a conversation is not, hi, how are you? You say something back to me and then we're done. It's, you heard what I said, and we go on back and forth several times through writing and through the artwork. And you're looking at their artwork, you're seeing what they're putting down. We're focused on this theme that we started off with. The whole process to me was fascinating, that we both had to get into our heads. We had to sort of get into each other's heads a little bit, and then we had to figure out how we're going to put that down on a piece of canvas. So that to me was really fascinating. La Bamba Wamba is my second one. He came up with a tagging name, which I thought was great. I gave him the theme of graffiti. He actually came back with the first piece of drawing, and to me, the moment that Kathleen showed it to me, it was like, oh my God, this guy has literally gotten into his head, poured his soul into this thing. Very, very, very few strokes. Just some black, some white, and some red. And he had this skull that was broken open, and he was coming up out of the skull. His arms are thrown back, chains are breaking off. And I mean, I could have counted the number of strokes. It wasn't that many strokes of artwork. But he communicated that he is breaking free of something, maybe heading towards redemption. There's lots of things that I think we each bring our own histories and narratives when we see a piece of artwork. And the same piece of artwork to each of us can mean a little bit something different. That's the magic of it. So I was seeing all kinds of really interesting things with this guy. Literally, I'm seeing freedom. I'm not seeing incarceration. And I think I said something to Kathleen instantly, like, I have to be very, very respectful of what he's done. He has put himself onto the left side of this piece of canvas. And, you know, that's pretty powerful. So then I went off and figured out how do I put something on the right side of the canvas and kind of go from there. So that's kind of the first round where we started from.
And Kim,
Yeah.
I really wanted to pair you with Juan, just because I knew the work that both of you do, and so I paired people sometimes based on, as the curator of this, it was sometimes a theme or something that I knew, a concept that would resonate with the inside artist, but there were a very few people that I just wanted to see them back and forth because I knew your work, I know his work, and it's just like, oh my God, when you guys started communicating visually, it was
It was really cool. Yeah, he came back from his theme with the black and white drawing of a crow, very beautiful against the cityscape. I was like, ooh, because I do a lot of cityscapes. And I've gone into this going, well, it's not going to be like a Reeser cityscape. This is about him. So I'm just going to like flow with what he's communicating. And he also drew this really sad bunny cartoon, this bunny like with his hands behind him. And yeah, it was just really powerful. So I kind of sat with it for a while. And I went, I'm going to do a crow flying away with like a bunny on his back. And I'm like, that might, it seemed a little saccharine, but I was like, I'm just going to do it. I don't care if it's saccharine. And then I like drew a couple of telephone wires on the right. And when I got it back, he had drawn this sort of electrical, like power substation thing against the sunset, which totally looks like my subject matter. And I was just like, wow, I feel like we're reading each other's minds through visually.
you
Like,
guys really
not
had
so much
some
the words.
intuitive.
It was so intuitive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So, and we also benefited from having a few iterations. So the last time I got it back, I, again, just sort of letting go of being rational, I was like, I see a whale staring at a streetlight. Okay. And I delivered it like a day late, so I was like, Kathleen, I got to glue this whale onto my piece. And I took it to her and I'm like, it's staring at a streetlight. And she goes, of course it is. So like, I don't know if anyone else will understand. I'm not even sure I understand what was going on with this piece, but it was really cool. And just one thing I wanted to share was, for me, it got me, like, everyone's talking about them being grateful to us, but I was really grateful to him because it really just sort of got me in touch with this primal joy of making art, just completely outside of the art world or anything like that. Just the pure joy of sitting down and making something. And that was great. I was like, wow, I feel like a kid again, just like, oh, I'm making stuff. Yeah, so.
Yeah, no different.
Yeah, that was really
different.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So some of the outside artists that are here in the audience, do you want to say anything about your collaborations? Like, there's a whole bunch of you here, and I'm so happy you're here, but we only have so many seats at the table. So, really, anything, Cindy? Cindy collaborated with a gentleman inside who is illiterate. And so when Cindy would write to him, we would go, he told me quietly that he couldn't read. And so I would go, we'd go off to the corner and I'd read what she wrote.
His prompt for me was what goes around comes around, which I think was pretty loaded because he came back saying, I hope it's something good that coming back at me, you know? And I realized, oh, maybe that was, you know, maybe that tipped him in a certain direction, but that's part of it too, isn't it? So anyway, when it comes back, there's a giant eye drawn in pencil, better than any eye I could ever draw. But I also am totally out of my comfort zone, you know. And I guess my favorite thing about it, you know, we didn't have as many iterations, but my coming up with anything I could do with that giant eye was so, it was a revelation for me too, and it pushed me to learning a bunch of new techniques to deal, you know, to not destroy that beautiful thing he made. Any collaboration, that's always my biggest fear, is that I'll run over somebody's something, you know.
You're right.
Anyway, I was thrilled with how it came out.
Carrie Ann, come on in here, because she had one of the most amazing collaborations. Would you like to talk to your conversation, your visual conversation with John?
Yeah, so John sent a painting that was in progress, and he had made this sort of vine shapes, and I think, well, we also had a conversation, but I really wanted him to try to be able to break out of the confines of the edges of the paper, and I'm a jeweler, so I'm not a painter. So
join the club.
yeah, so essentially I scanned his painting and then I traced his shapes and made a laser cutting file, and I cut like 100 of his shapes over and over and over so that he could then like collage them back together and build something that came off of the page or came off of the wall. And yeah, it was really emotional actually. Just our conversation was I'm sorry. But so he took those pieces of cut Bristol and then added paint to them, and then here in the gallery I put them together as a sort of like hanging installation. But I think what really affected me was that his, so the prompt that I gave him was to think about an object that reminded him of home, and he painted something that was sort of like nature and something that I would assume he feels really far away from, and so it ended up being a more symbolic idea of something that reminded him of home, and to kind of build something that envelopes you was essentially what became the outcome. So you're supposed to stick your head in it, is what I'm trying to tell you. When you go back to the
Go in there
gallery
and stick your head in it.
yeah, when you go back into the gallery space, you're supposed to sort of be enveloped by this thing, and that is his idea of home.
And I think next to his piece is a book that he and a couple other guys inside made, and they made this book out of trash.
Beautiful.
Trash that is in the prison, and their whole idea is that something beautiful can come from trash that's been discarded.
I think also it's an important point of connection for the inside artist and you, the viewer. And obviously, like if you were at an art opening where the artist is present, you can say, "Oh, congratulations!" and "Oh, this is a very nice piece. This is interesting. What's the idea?" Blah blah blah. But because they're not here to actually physically experience that, they ask that you use that book as a way to connect to them on the inside.
And that was the whole concept of this project, is that they crave feedback. They want to connect. Stacy, I think that your project was intense Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because you talk about your prompt first and then where it went, because this is insane.
So my prompt was, well, when Kathleen asked me to be a part of the project.
I bullied you. You must do this.
She did, actually, in the middle of a furniture store, but okay, that's another story. But my work is, for the last several years, is centered around endangered and extinct birds. So when Kathleen asked me nicely to be a part of this project, the first thing that just popped into my head was the caged bird trade, which is one of the main things that is causing extinction in birds. But it's also appropriate for, so I was really curious to see whether he would take that, just caged bird trade. And I got back, and I know that he, Russell, my collaborator, was asking a lot about that and the subject. I kind of wanted to leave it open for him, but it's nice that he asked questions. And so I got back a line of a prison wall with the prison cages, and then a few bird cages from it was Asian bird trade things. That's the biggest part of it. So I had that. So I had this and it's wonderful perspective. I was really impressed that he actually had that perspective down. This is a very hard concept to get, so I was impressed by that. And so and it was great because that he actually had the Asian, because Valley Mina is one of the birds that are going totally extinct because of this. And so I pulled out the Valley Mina into that and the Indonesian thing. But it's amazing to have this collaboration of thinking about the cage and being caged, and how pulling somebody from their natural environment is actually causing them death, and death of that species, and death of those cultures, right? And those and mass incarceration, and you getting into all the racial and political things that go beyond that. So it was nice that he actually was able to tap into that. And so it was really cool, and it was really amazing to see what he would come. And I was really shocked by what I got. I was so surprised, and it was beautiful to work with. And it was beautiful to, and again, you do want to have that respect, and that having that conversation was really cool, because I will never meet him or know who he was, but it was really lovely to have that conversation and to bring those things together.
Can I follow up on that, on the idea of respect? So after round one, back to graffiti out there, I thought we were done. I had put a lot of effort into my side of it. I've never airbrushed in my life. I went and bought an airbrush kit on Amazon, had it there in 2 days. I researched every bit of graffiti I could through YouTube, which there's a lot of YouTube out there about graffiti. I decided to use an airbrush so I could scale down graffiti from large paint and everything else to something that was going to fit in a little piece of the artwork. And when I finished it, I was pretty pleased that the colors, the theme, something personal. There was an anchor in there. I spent 10 years, or actually more than 10 years, volunteering on the Star of India. And so an anchor and nautical theme. I come from a Navy family, so I put something about myself next to his person sort of freeing himself. And I thought, we've got a collaboration here. This is good. This is ready to be framed. Kathleen brought it back to me, and I remember the moment that she showed it to me. I think my jaw probably hit the street for 5 minutes. I don't know if you were ready to break smelling salts under my nose or not, but in round two, he decided to go from a tattoo style, which he'd used for his person freeing themselves, and he bent the rules. The rules, if there were rules for graffiti, he writes about this a fair amount. He said, I like to bend rules. I don't break them, but I bend rules. That's kind of part of the way he sees himself, I guess. He said, I bent the rules. I understand it's graffiti, but I went with tattoo. And I was cool with that because it expressed visually what I was hoping he would express.
You weren't cool with that at all.
Well, no.
You were so pissed off that he had covered up your shit. And I'm like, Ty, that's what graffiti is. They cover up your shit.
I'm saying I was cool in round one. with what he did. In round 2, she opened up her trunk, and her back of her car is really neat.
It's not neat. Where's Rich?
And she held it like this for a second, and then she did the reveal, and I literally think I probably needed smelling salts. He decided to go back to graffiti. And he not only decided to go back to it, he went back and covered up 90% of everything that was on the canvas. Now I went off and spent $150 on a kit, and with Sherry out in the garage, I'm like, I think I can get a dot doing this, and I think I can get a line like this, and I'm trying to translate graffiti into airbrush moves and practice. I was going through canvas and all kinds of stuff. I was there on round 1. He came back, and round 1 was underneath round 2. And I think Sherry picked me off the ground, and he said, sleep on it for a day or 2, which it took me a day.
Or 2.
Or 2.
I said, you gave him the prompt graffiti. He's gonna cover up your shit. That's what graffiti is.
And being the person I am, I came back and covered up his shit. I went and got the biggest piece of canvas I could find. I bought real paint from Home Depot. They probably thought the guy looks a little old to be tagging, but gray hair, you get away with that kind of stuff. I went out in the backyard, and having studied graffiti for like 3 weeks, graffitied this canvas, and went back to my photography, back to roots, and took these images that many different graffiti writers from Chula Vista, Otay Lakes, surrounding South Bay folks, all of these people come into this one area and tag over each other, and they do scenes. If you get into graffiti, there's many different forms of graffiti. There's me putting my name on top of something you did. There's me disrespecting you and wiping out what you've done. There's me putting up scenes. There's different ways that people get into it. There's actually crews. People get into a crew, and the senior person in the crew teaches other people in the crew how they start to develop style. There's collaboration within the crews and everything. It's a very fascinating world. So I decided to go back and up the ante a little bit to collaborate one more level, and did this sort of with a photographer's eye, a blurry background, because I wanted my depth of field to be kind of shallow. I wanted the focus to be on what he had done, but then I also wanted to go back to my roots with my photography, and to bring in a collaboration of 20, 30 people that I've never met, that go and tag this area near the prison, and take their photographs of all of these things that they do, and put them around the outside of what the two of us have collaborated on. So there's layers on top of layers on top of layers. If you look really closely, you'll see the anchor is still kind of there in the maelstrom, but there's now many other layers of things going on. Very carefully took it back and gave it to Kathleen, thinking, what could you do to this? And she took it, and
he didn't want to touch it again.
she brought it back, and I got to see it, and he'd come full circle as far as I'm concerned in the collaboration. He then went and put his name, Lawamba Wamba, in the upper left-hand corner, and he wrote my name in a really cool tagging style in the lower left. And I thought, he's completed this.
Yeah.
And it took a long U-turn and a roadblock, but we got over it, and we've shared these things back and forth. I wrote him a letter, and there's been some really neat communication back and forth. And the whole thing was way beyond, more meaningful than I could have.
And I know we're going on and on and on, and like we're going over, but I want to touch base with Robin again, because what happens in prison is people disappear. Your collaborator will disappear. They'll be transferred. They'll whatever, or they'll just simply drop out. Xavier back there, his artist got transferred, which was a good thing for him because he got closer to his family, but Robin's collaborator just stopped coming. And how do you deal with that?
I had the advantage, I think, of having been a teacher with Project Paint, so I was aware of this phenomenon happening all the time, as well as having brand new students come in, and as an instructor, how do you catch up a guy who's 12 classes in on a project? It just so happened, once we realized that my original collaborator was not going to be coming back, there was a brand new guy, and so it was decided, like, well, let's see, maybe he can kind of become a second collaborator. I think he
Can
might
I say
have.
bad words? He fucked it up.
To me, he kind of did the piece a favor in a way, but I'm glad that the original artist did not get to see what he did because we had a few exchanges, and the new person painted over everything and actually erased all of the pencil drawing that the first guy had done, and so by the time I got it had been a really long time, and it had also been everything that I saw the first time was erased, not even by the artist, but by a second person, and painted over. And so I kind of, for me and the type of work that I do, it was almost like perfect. It was like what I would have wanted to happen. But it was hard because I also kind of wanted to honor the original person, and you can see it out there. It has some camel drawings, which are kind of the only one that survived, the only bit that kind of survived before the piece was confiscated from the newer artist.
So we are running out of time.
I can't stop talking.
But I do want to ask Robin a follow-up to that about how the prison environment really shapes what you do, how the process works, what you can and can't do.
It really, first of all, you have to understand, a lot of us have taught art in more traditional environments, or we've worked in studios that are studios, and it doesn't just transfer over. I can't give a lecture to these guys in the same way I would at an art school. At the same time, you want to treat them with a level of respect and challenge, but if you've been living in that environment, and some of our students have been living there for over 20, 30 years, some of them have life without parole, so they will be living there for the foreseeable future, and realizing they've been living in an environment where there's absolutely no choice. So a lot of times when we give them opportunities to be creative, there is this huge sense of, I don't know what to do, like tell me what to do, and it takes a while to kind of trust us as instructors and facilitators and know that we're not going to tell you what to do. Part of the challenge is that we're going to help you, and you have to come to this and be creative, and so that's kind of the amazing side. The hard side is when I decided I wanted to bring printmaking into the facility, so San Quentin has those kinds of classes, but that is bougie, like everyone wants to be there because they have like art galleries and studios, and that's not what Donovan is. Donovan is, we are teaching in a gym that we share with a veterans group, that we also share with Pill Line, which means every single guy on the yard that takes medication at CDCR lines up in our classroom. And we are still expected to continue class and teach through that. So that's like a logistical challenge. Obviously thinking about materials. So when I mentioned printmaking earlier, thinking about like how do we do etching or screen printing in a facility, and just for me it was amazing to kind of force myself to think about how to not only instruct, but how to actually get materials that the warden's office would approve to be brought in. And also so a big part is being flexible, like we mentioned. There will be nights where we're in the middle of a great work period and there will be a fight, so it's called yard down.
Not in our class.
Never, literally never in our class, but someone, the veterans group probably.
If you actually go to Peter Mertz, who's the photographer, you will see photographs that he has taken, and you will see us teaching our class with human cages in the background.
It should be on the screen soon. I realize I have the USB stick in my pocket
Right.
right now, but it will be up
seriously, we will be teaching, and somebody will be put in a human cage in our classroom and stripped to their underwear, and we are teaching
there's
that.
and there's urinals along the wall. They're not supposed to use those during class, but that happens. So the pill line, the peeing, the other groups happening.
Yeah, or they'll do piss tests. You know,
Yeah.
it's like you've got pee tests to see if somebody's dirty. You know, and it's like right in front of you, and you're like, I'm going to talk about color theory over there. You're peeing in a cup over there.
Yeah. So those are challenges that make it. I think that's why like we feel kind of emotional, because in a lot of ways it is like it's such an uphill battle. Like we are week after week like fighting this, not fighting, but working within this system that is so challenging, not just for our participants, but even for us. Like we have a contract with the state to provide the program, but there's some memo that didn't get sent down from this office to this person, this person, this person, and just to be working within this paramilitary structure, providing this programming, it's really hard, like really, really hard from kind of a red tape perspective. But then you have like things like this, and it's so amazing.
And we're here and we love what we do.
So I do have lots more questions, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and I want to open it up to questions from the audience too. So I wanted to just ask, is there any sort of final thing that you'd like to, leave with the audience before we open it up to a couple of questions, and then we can all break and eat some wonderful snacks?
Snacks.
I have one quick thing that I think was a question later, but was pretty interesting.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, the question was, what are the benefits of arts and corrections programs in general? And something that I've been asked by even colleagues that work within correctional facilities is like, well, what's the point for guys that aren't going to be released? Like, why are you doing like rehabilitative programs for them? And aside from, we know that arts and corrections programs reduce things like violence inside facilities, like behavioral incidents inside facilities. You can see change in people, and you can see, like, I have one participant in particular who I've like never seen smile ever, and from what I've heard from his guys, like he does not do that. And for whatever reason, kind of having this space where we don't have officers in the room, we don't, our rules are basically be respectful to yourself and us, do work, like work hard, that's kind of it. And it's so rare that they're in a position where they're working with people that really respect them. I mean, we truly value them as artists, and we are constantly telling them about all of the people who saw their work and how impressed everyone was with them. And so you're really kind of giving value to a life that has been sort of determined to be
Invaluable.
Yeah.
And that's, your guy is LWOP, life without parole. Kim, your guy is LWOP, life without parole. But with sentencing reform, they could be out, possibly. And I'm cool with them being my neighbors.
Yeah.
I have seen redemption. I believe in redemption. I believe in rehabilitation, and I think that's one of the things that gets lost along the way. But I think we've seen that over and over and over again.
All right, should we open it up? So let's take a couple of questions.
How do people get to be a part of this program? Who gets to take your classes?
So anyone can sign up as long as they're available during the class times, and we hold classes in the evening really to be as open. A lot of them take classes during the day. I mean, like school classes during the day or work during the day. So we hold classes in the evening. They do have to submit an application, but we're not really screening for anything. It's more just to know a little bit about who they are and what they're interested in and what their background in art is, you know, if there is any. And then they go on to a wait list to, you know, if we've got full classes, which usually we do.
We always do.
Each class has 24 students. That's the max we can have. So we always have a waiting list. But like they can't have what's called a 115 infraction. But we evaluate that on a case-by-case basis because one guy came to us and said he had a 115 infraction within the last 12 months, and it was because he fed a bird.
On the yard.
Okay, I'm good with you. You can take my class.
I'd like to talk about stigma because I think what's amazing, I was raised around convicts most of my life. And I noticed everyone got really emotional, and it's just because I think we try to avoid the emotionality of the subject. But I think a lot of people don't want to talk about prison reform because of the stigma that comes with you were bad, you did these things. A lot of people don't realize that just being poor is a reason that you're put in prison, and a lot of people don't even want to talk about it. So I admire the work that you guys are doing in breaking down these walls. And do you foresee perhaps maybe this getting traction across the nation perhaps and widening the discussion as far as people living in cages, whether they're children or adults, or do you even want to go into like a refugee type of situation? Have you thought about expanding in that perspective? I mean, there's a lot of places you guys can go, even Politsky Center, some, dealing with people with traumatic. Has that been in the works at all?
We are stressed beyond. I mean, we do what we can do, and that's. I mean, it's all we can do. Yeah, we're down there so many nights a week, and it's like I'd love to save everybody, but I can only do what I can do, and it just like breaks my heart that I can't do more.
Well, you guys are definitely role models for
Well, thank you so
the
much.
future.
But I will say that there is, I think, very much a national arts and corrections movement that has been happening, and it's been happening for decades. But I do think it's on the uptick right now. So I'm part of an organization called the Justice Arts Coalition. It used to be called the Prison Arts Coalition, but we actually changed the name because of wanting to be more inclusive and recognizing that there are people working using the arts in this same type of way in all types of different correctional settings, prisons, but also beyond, kind of looking at immigrant detention centers as that was a huge one that we were focused on. So I do really think that people are recognizing more and more the power of the arts. Using arts in this kind of trauma-informed way, can be very, very powerful. So even though we focus, on the prison side of things, I totally agree. And I think that we are very much aligned with organizations doing similar things in different settings.
I do just also want to add to that. A lot of times I'll think about our guys and I'll see like the transformation and think, I wonder what would have happened if they had had access to arts education before things went tits up. And so I do just want to stress, it's amazing to get these kind of programs into schools, into communities. We focus specifically, on the CDCR system, but I think it's definitely a tool that people are starting to look at more when they're working on whether it be reentry or diversion programs. Yeah, I think it's happening just slowly.
I thought that your program had initiated further programs in the state of California. Is that correct?
Well, so we're part of, so Arts and Corrections is this kind of like umbrella program in the state of California, and it has been now, this is the second year when Arts and Corrections is back into all of the CDCR prisons, and that's huge. We haven't had that for a few decades at this point. So yes, I mean, it's very much part of this kind of entire network. You know, California is doing awesome stuff in terms of arts and corrections, but other states are also really working on this. Like, for example, Alabama has the, what is it? Alabama Prison Arts and Education Project. And then what's the University of Michigan? Michigan has their Prison Creative Arts Project. So there are some states that are really, you know, working to try to expand programming overall.